Only a few more weeks until the story behind book is out, and one of my podcasting mentors and buddies, Dave Jackson, gave me the idea to do a bunch of episodes relating to books around this time, to hopefully set the mood for its release. So while I was looking into different topics, I found out the week that this episode comes out, the week from October 23rd to the 29th of 2018, is Banned Books Week. So what better time to have that as a topic? I'm your host, Emily Prokop, and this is the story behind banned books. But first, a quick book update. Even though we'll be talking about book banning in this episode, I have a feeling the story behind book probably won't be banned anytime soon, although it might be challenged, but you'll find out more about the difference between that later in the episode. But for those who want to get their hands on a copy, just in case it ever gets banned for any reason, you can find the story behind book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, for your Kindle or ebook reader, or go to thestorybehindbook.com. By the way, don't forget to email me a copy of your receipt to thestorybehindpod@gmail.com, and I'll do a giveaway on release day for some Story Behind swag and a few other goodies. If you remember back to the episode, The Story Behind the Necktie, you may remember I talked about the first Chinese emperor who asked his soldiers to be buried with him when he died in 210 BC. Instead, they buried 7,000 life-size terracotta soldiers who were carved wearing the earliest known neckcloths. Well, to peel back the curtain a bit on the show, I had a hard time finding the right way to pronounce the emperor's name, so I left it out. And I didn't think I would need it, but apparently the same emperor is back for this episode. So his name is either Shi Huang Ti or Qin Shi Huang, depending on the source. But the reason I bring this up is because it was during his reign as the first Chinese emperor that he burned all books in his kingdom, except for a single copy of each one for the royal library. But he decided those also needed to be destroyed before his death. Now, while he didn't get to bury his 7,000 soldiers with him, he did bury 460 Confucian scholars alive to stop them from writing down the history of time. The reason he burned the books and buried the scholars was said to be because he wanted future generations to believe that history began with him. Ars Amatoria, translated to The Art of Love, written by Roman poet Ovid, was the cause of him being banished to Greece in exile in 8 AD. But the ban on his writings weren't just something that happened back then. His works were burned in Florence in what's known as the Bonfire of the Vanities in 1497. In this bonfire was anything that was considered immoral or that led to sin. Most book banning and book burnings have been the result of authorities considering the works to be vulgar or inappropriate. In the case of Caligula opposing the reading of the Odyssey in 35 AD, he thought it would be dangerous for his subjects to be exposed to the Greek ideas of freedom. And in the book of Acts in the Bible, sorcery and magic books and scrolls were burned publicly by Ephesians who were converted to Christianity. Banning books wasn't just relegated to ancient history, though it was easier to stop the spread of literature before the printing press was invented in 1450. But even after the printing press was invented and books could be manufactured quicker throughout the years, that didn't stop books from being banned. In fact, listing all the instances that books were banned and or burned would take up probably 20 episodes easily. It's weird to look back and think about the important and groundbreaking books that were once banned or destroyed, like Galileo's widow agreeing to destroy her husband's manuscripts of his theories of the universe because it was condemned by the Catholic Church. Even books that are now considered classics were banned when they were first released, like Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. In fact, the ban is probably part of the reason the book is considered a classic. The book was known to be one of the many catalysts for the Civil War, and the Confederacy banned the book. Abraham Lincoln even remarked when meeting Stowe, "So you're the little woman who wrote the book that made this great war." Even though the book was banned, it was still one of the most popular books of the time, becoming the second biggest seller in the 19th century, with the first being the Bible. But after the Civil War, other books came under fire when a man named Anthony Comstock rose to power. After serving in the Civil War, he moved to New York City. Coming from a Puritan background, New York City's booming businesses, saloons, and gambling halls shocked him. He joined the Young Men's Christian Association, which, for those who may not know, is the YMCA, before it was associated with swimming pools and the village people. He worked with the YMCA to spread the word about vices, or traps of immorality, which included books he thought were obscene. With his newly formed Committee for the Suppression of Vice, he began seizing thousands of books, among other materials, in raids. Believe it or not, this wasn't seen as a violation for a long time. His efforts even spread to Washington, and an anti-obscenity law was passed, known as the Comstock Act, signed by President Grant in 1873. There was already a law on the books that dealt with obscenity in the mail. However, this law strengthened the punishments and widened the spectrum of what was considered obscene. Comstock was known for going after printers and publishers of anything containing obscenity. He became a special agent of the U.S. Post Office, and while there are reports that he confiscated and removed information sent via mail concerning things like contraception, he was more known for helping put a stop to get-rich-quick schemes, scams, advertisements for product that seemed to cure all with no scientific proof, and counterfeit currency. But still, a lot of books were banned while Comstock had this power. But slowly, the Comstock Act was repealed bit by bit until 1965. In general, the First Amendment has been applied to many cases involving the banning of books in the United States, even with school libraries in 1982, when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a book or periodical must be pervasively vulgar in order for a school to remove it from the library. But book banning is still around. Every year there is a new list of the top banned books in the United States. These books aren't necessarily new either. In fact, in 2017, a classic that many of us probably had to read in high school showed up on the banned books list, To Kill a Mockingbird. And it wasn't the book's first time on the list either. If you ever want to do some head scratching, take a look at these lists. In fact, for a presentation back in college, I did a report on banned books and was able to easily locate some of the most banned books right out of my own collection. Now, before you go thinking I'm reading all sorts of smut, these books included To Kill a Mockingbird, Shakespeare, the Harry Potter series, The Catcher in the Rye, Of Mice and Men, The Lord of the Flies, and Green Eggs and Ham. No, I'm not even joking about these. In fact, many of these books I had because I was made to read them back in high school. For my presentation, I went so far as to throw these books in the trash can of the classroom to make a point about what happens when books are banned, and to have the class imagine what it would be like not to have those books. I also got to watch the looks of shock and horror when I dropped the Bible in the bin in my presentation because, yes, even the Bible has been under scrutiny. By the way, I retrieved all the books afterward and I made sure beforehand that the garbage bin had a clean bag in it. So don't worry, all the books made it back home to my shelf safe and sound. And lightning didn't strike me down either. One thing to note is the difference between a book being challenged and a book being banned. A book challenge is a documented request to remove the book from a library or curriculum, while a ban is when the challenge is successful. The American Library Association estimates that 85% of challenges get no media attention and are unreported, so you can imagine the actual banning of books isn't seen quite as much, but the challenges are seen plenty. If you've ever seen the episode of Parks and Recreation in which citizens are voting on what to put in the city's time capsule, you may remember the town forum meeting in which the Twilight books were being discussed.
So we have one very moving case for Twilight. Anyone else? Great, 2 people for Twilight.
Oh, no. I'm Marcia Langman from the Society for Family Stability Foundation. This book contains pagan creatures and strong sexual overtones. There are girls quivering. There are boys staring deeply into girls' eyes as they quiver and so forth. There really is a tremendous amount of quivering. It is anti-Christian, it is pro-quivering, and the government has no business promoting it.
I totally disagree.
Well, now we have 2 people for Twilight.
Absolutely not. I'm with the National Civil Liberties Association. That book actually contains overt Christian themes, and as such has no business being associated with any government project.
So, too Christian and not Christian enough. Do you see the irony here? No? Okay.
The reason for challenges usually involves the matter within the book, whether it's offensive language, sexual content, racism, drug use, violence, or political or religious reasons. Actually, if you're listening to the list and wondering how Green Eggs and Ham was put on the banned books list, it's because in some countries it was seen as a portrayal of Marxism. As political attitudes shift and adjust, so do the challenges on books. Back in 1982, when Reagan ran for election and won on a platform that included depowering those who fight for First Amendment freedoms, the number of books that were challenged increased, and the American Library Association responded with Banned Books Week, with the goal of helping people understand that books that are challenged aren't necessarily pornographic or particularly violent, but we should celebrate our freedom to read. What's funny is when libraries and bookstores began putting up posters and displays of books that were challenged and that have been banned, They found more customers interested in those books. By the way, it's not just books in the traditional sense that are banned. The Comic Book Legal Defense Fund is another sponsor of Banned Books Week, and has said that at least one graphic novel has been included on the top 10 list of challenged books every year since 2011. Even though book banning cases rarely make it to the Supreme Court, Banned Book Week still calls attention to the seemingly smaller cases of challenged books, like parents and school boards asking books be removed from summer reading lists. But as long as free speech remains, so will challenges to it. Information for this episode was sourced from Literary Hub, Freedom to Read, BannedBooksWeek.org, and more links which can be found in the show notes at thestorybehindpodcast.com. This week on Trivia Tuesday in the Story Behind discussion group on Facebook, Glenn posted, apparently Macho Man Randy Savage stole his voice, style, and entire gimmick from a performer named Pampero Firpo. When kids were doing Macho Man voices on the playground, they were actually doing Pampero Firpo voices. Mark posted he learned that the man who invented the Pringles chips container was cremated and his ashes were buried in a Pringles can as per his final wishes. Jen posted that she had her mind blown when she found out new fandom facts about the Harry Potter universe, including Nagini was a human. And Jeffrey posted, famous for her Oscar-winning roles as Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind and Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire, British actress Vivien Leigh was born Vivian Mary Hartley in Darjeeling, British India, which is now West Bengal. If you'd like to talk about trivia you pick up during the week and have it read on the show, join the Story Behind discussion group on Facebook. This episode was brought to you by the Story Behind executive producers who support the show through the Patreon page at patreon.com/thestorybehind. And thank you to newest executive producer Dan Gallagher, as well as ongoing executive producers Jonathan Bloom, Ryan P. Jackson, Barry G., Andrew Scott, Jared Dunham, Linguist Sam, Epic Film Guy Nick, Ryle Davis Jr., Dave Jackson, Sunshine and Power Cuts, Everyone Has a Podcast, Adam Higgins, The Beardcaster, Aliquity from Travel Gluten Free, Jim Collison, North Omaha History Podcast, Dan Brennick, 2 Ps on a Podcast, Jason Bryant, History Goes Bump, The One Word Go Show, and Stargate Pioneer. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.